Hey guys, going over a new deck tech here. This deck is pretty new, um, but it is starting to surface, and I made it about a week ago or so, and I've really enjoyed it. It's really fun. Not for my opponents though, but land destruction decks have always been around, and people have tried so hard to make them work. Well, it's finally happened. We finally have a competitive, viable land destruction deck. Um, so as you can see, this one is pure black. The thing that this deck does differently than most land destruction decks have done in the past is that this one is super fast. So even on turn one, you can start taking out land. That and the in-game threats are very real in this deck. Unlike before, when you would really just be beating in with like mana dorks or maybe a blastoderm here or there, things of that nature. Um, but let's go ahead and go over the deck. We have four of these bogs. Now these come in tapped. They get two counters on them. You can tap them to add 2 mana and remove a counter. So this allows you to use one of your 3 drops on turn 2. So even if say your opponent gets play first, comes over to you, you can play this, and then you can essentially start destroying lands on turn 2 with the bog, and it's pretty common that you draw these guys. And once you use all the depletion counters, you sacrifice the land, which makes more fuel for your angler. We'll get to that later. We also have 4 Radiant Fountain. These tap for colorless. They come into play and you gain 2 life. Now, these are really important, and there's a big reason why you play these. We'll get into that later. We have 11 basic swamps. We have 4 dark rituals. This enables us to use our land destruction on turn 1. So if our opponent goes first, plays a land, then it's us. We can play a swamp, use dark ritual, and then blow up his land. And if most people really only have like 2, sometimes 3 lands in their opening hand, and if you can take 1 or 2 of them out, then you're in good shape. A lot of people often will keep one-landers. Like if you're playing against Burn or Goblins or Stompy or Elves, things like that, and you destroy their one and only land, you're in really good shape. Next we have our card advantage. We have 4 Night's Whisper. It's 2 mana, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. And Sign in Blood, which is the same. It's 2 black mana, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It's pretty much the same as Night's Whisper, except Night's Whisper is a black and a colorless. You can use Sign in Blood to target your opponent, but I don't foresee us ever really doing that, unless it kills our opponent, of course. But the reason the Radiant Fountain is so good is because this is a lot of self-damage we're doing to each other. And we're even doing more damage to ourselves with other cards that you'll see later. Another card advantage card that we play is Chittering Rats. I'm sure you've seen these running around. They're 3 mana 2/2s. When it enters the battlefield, your opponent puts a card from his or her hand in the top of his library. So this is really good card advantage, but it's also good to delay your opponent from drawing lands. So if they have no lands, then you can play this, and that's a whole nother turn that they don't get to play anything. It's a time walk. This Chittering Rats is very often a time walk, and I mean they're amazing. Now let's go on to our land destruction package. We have 3 mana, destroy target land. If it's non-basic, it deals 2 damage to its controller. So if possible, you kind of want to aim these Choking Sands to non-basic lands, dual lands, things like that. Do keep in mind that this hits non-swamps. So if you're playing against, say, Blue-Black Delver or dredge or anything that's black in another color. You want to use your choking sands on the non-swamp cards because your other lands can hit the swamp cards. So it's very, very important you keep that in mind. Next we have Icequake, 3 mana, destroy target land. If it's a snow land, it deals 1 damage to its controller. Very rare. Very rare you're going to see a snow land. Maybe against blue, red, the Delver, Skred. That's probably really the only time you're going to see snow lands. And then we have Rancid Earth, 3 mana, destroy target land. If you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So this is pretty good against elves, fairies, things of that sort. The threshold is rarely ever going to take place. It's kind of just a little bonus. Optimally, well, let me say it like this. If your opponent is getting to the point where they have enough X1 creatures that you're probably going to die, you're not going to win anyway because you need to be taking out their land. So the threshold isn't really going to play a role too much in this deck, especially because your angler is going to be eating your graveyard for the most part. So essentially just treat this as a land destruction spell. It may play a role sometimes, but not very often. Next land destruction spell we have is Befoul. This is 4 mana, and instead of the 3 that we've been seeing, and because of that, it can either destroy a target land or a non-black creature and it can't be regenerated. Most of the time this is going to hit a land, but sometimes it will hit a creature. Say like if your opponent got a really fast start, you've gained control of his lands, but say you got a fast start, say he played like a turn 1 Delver, or maybe he plays a swamp and then slams down an angler, something like that. If he slams down an angler, you're in big trouble because you can't take out non-black creatures. But other things you'll be able to take out. So angler's a pretty big issue, and we got taken the sideboard against anglers, but we'll get into that later. Another creature destruction spell you have is Snuff Out. It's a 4 mana instant. But if you want, instead of paying the 4, if you control a swamp, which we almost always will, you can pay 4 life instead. And you can destroy target non-black creature, and it can be regenerated. And so it's pretty much the dismember of Pauper. Now this is also a card that hurts you, along with your Sign of Blood and your Night's Whisper. So that's why the Radiant Fountain is so important, because this life gain is very key. And a creature that we have the Cheering Rats, but this is our main win condition here, the Gurmag Angler. It is a 7 mana 5/5 with Delve, so I can choose to exile a card in my graveyard instead for 1 colorless mana. So we can essentially pay him for 1 black. And the last card is Siphon Life. Now I have seen a lot of builds not use Siphon Life and instead go with a 12th swamp. But I think Siphon Life is really important because your deck deals a lot of damage to yourself, so the life gain is very useful. Essentially what this does is target player loses 2 life and you gain 2. Now it has Retrace. That means that you can discard a land card and cast this from your graveyard. You can do it as many times as you like. This is pretty important because you're doing so much damage to yourself that it is really nice to be able to gain that life off what would be dead cards like lands. I think it's really important that you have this in the deck, just 1. Because you hurt yourself so much. And if your opponent's playing Burn, then that's a really, really good card against Burn. If they're playing some kind of aggro deck, then it helps against that. Anyway, that's pretty much the deck. You're taking out lands, you're delaying the game, then you just slam down anglers and essentially win with those. You can win with Cheering Rats too, but anglers essentially the win condition here. Now, the sideboard, we have 4 Chainer's Edict. This is for the big creatures like Hexproof, It is also good against Gurmag Angler. It's good against stuff like... It's good against Olamog's Crusher, but honestly, we have Snuff Out and Befoul for the Olamog's Crusher. These are essentially just for Hexproof, Angler, things of that sort. We have the 4 Doomblade. Pretty self-explanatory there. Destroy target non-black creature. This is... we usually take out like Snuff Out for these. I've seen a lot of builds have Doomblade in their sideboard, and I have not yet been able to really figure out why. I understand that they cost less than the Snuff Out, sure, but the Snuff Out can be free. Now maybe if Doomblade said something other than destroy a non-black creature, but Snuff Out says the same thing, so I don't know. I jumped on the bandwagon with the Doomblades. I'm not sure if I like them or not, so I'll have to do some more playtesting with those. We have the 4 Kumbaj Witches here. These are 2 mana, 1/3. You can tap it to deal 1 damage to target creature or player, and then the opponent chooses 1 damage to deal for you. It's almost always going to hit you because our creatures can't die with just 1 damage, so the opponent's almost always going to hit us. Now these are most commonly Thorn of the Black Rose, and one would think that they're just a flat upgrade, but I don't know. I don't think so. I really like Kumbaj Witches, and I think I like them more than Thorn of the Black Rose. And that's not only because Thorn of the Black Rose is $10 a piece, but that plays a huge role. I'm sure a lot of you out there don't want to pay $40 just for a playset of Thorn of the Black Rose when Kumbaj Witches pretty well does the job, if not better, in this specific deck. We also have 2 Evenkar's Justice. This is a 4 mana sorcery. Deal 2 damage to each creature and each player. You can buy it back for 3. So if you pay 5 colorless and 2 black, you can cast it and get it back. It's good against goblins, elves. It can be good against slivers if they don't have any lords, things like that. We also have 1 Shrivel. This is mostly for elves because elves is really popular right now. But you'll know that there's no Crypt Rats in this deck. Evenkar's Justice is kind of my Crypt Rats here. Crypt Rats is far better, but Crypt Rats is also pretty expensive. I think they're up to like $6 or $7 a piece, and I didn't want to make it that expensive because I know a lot of you guys out there like to build the decks that I play, and I can't really justify, spending that much on a deck because some of you may not want to spend that, and I don't want to play cards that you don't feel comfortable getting. You follow me? Anyway, I really like this deck. It's growing in popularity. I wanted to grab it before it got popular because I've noticed that a bunch of cards are actually going up in price just because Pauper in general is growing in popularity. Anyway, guys, let me know in the comments below what you think about the deck. This deck is very mean. It's kind of the bully of Pauper. It's very evil. If you like to see your opponent squirm, and this is probably the deck for you. This deck pretty much leaves your opponent's board without any permanents and just a big pile of salt. Comment down below what you think I should put in my sideboard. I'm not completely convinced of the sideboard plan yet. I do like the Kumbaj Witches. Those are here to stay. The Chainer's Edicts are here to stay because they really help pump up the weakness that this deck has. Evenkar's Justice, I kind of feel is here to stay. It's really good against elves. I think the Doomblade can go. I think the Shrivel may be able to go because I have 2 Evenkar's Justice. Maybe the Shrivel can become the 3rd Evenkar's Justice. I'm not really sure. I'm not entirely sure yet what this deck's weaknesses are, and I think that's what a sideboard is built off of. A sideboard is meant to fill the holes that your deck gets, depending on what you play up against. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you like seeing this deck play out, because I have a feeling that I'm going to be playing quite a bit of it because it is really fun. Thanks, guys. See ya.